Hi, and welcome to Alta Live. I am so excited to see you all here joining today's discussions on Earthlings in Outer Space with writer and Alta Journal contributor David Ewing Duncan. I'm Beth Spotswood, and I'm Alta's digital editor. It takes a minute for our Zoom room to fill in. While we do that, I'm going to run over the lay of the land with you, or the lay of the planets with you. Today, we're going to talk with David about what happens to humans, both physically and mentally, when we embark on lengthy space travel, and why scientists are working to make the journey to Mars and beyond more survivable and comfortable for us humans. David Ewing Duncan is an award-winning journalist in print, television, and radio. He's the best-selling author of 10 books published in 21 languages, and is an entrepreneur. His most recent book is Talking to Robots: Tales from Our Human-Robot Futures. And he also penned Get Ready for a 10,000-Hour Road Trip for the current issue of Alta Journal's special section, The New Space Age. And that's really what inspired today's conversation. We'll link to it here in the comments. This article, I will admit, blew my mind. It's fantastic. Before we dive into a discussion, some brief housekeeping. Alta Live is the digital interview series we do here at Alta Journal. If you're unfamiliar with Alta, we are an award-winning quarterly magazine and website focused on California and the West. You can join us as a member for as little as $3 a month and support the work we do here, including our monthly California book club, which is free and very fun to join. I encourage you to join, as well as presenting weekly events just like this one. There is a Q&A. Hi, Novato. I'm also in Novato, San Francisco, South San Francisco. Hi, please let us know where you're zooming in from. It's always great to see, presumably on Earth. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions for David. We'll chat for about 25 minutes and then get to as many of your questions as we can. Eugene, Oregon. Hi, Desher. This will all be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later this afternoon. We will also send you a link with a video to this. It is so great to be with our community today. See people from Texas, Pennsylvania, Santa Monica, Ontario, Salinas. Welcome, welcome everyone. Thousand Oaks. Vandenberg Air Force Base. Very cool. David, where are you zooming in from today? It looks like you're on Mars.
I am on Mars. I'm in a little tiny place called Martha's Vineyard, on little known spot on Mars. Also sometimes known as being from Massachusetts.
Got it. Well, I loved this feature you wrote in our new Space Age section of Alta. It's fantastic. And it left me with a ton of questions, which I'm going to dive into right now. How close are we really to getting regular people? And by regular people, I don't necessarily mean non-astronauts. I mean non-billionaires, people that are not Jeff Bezos or NASA astronauts.
Okay.
Into real space travel.
Well, it depends on, in a way, what you mean by real space travel. I mean, even Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, they went in a near Earth orbit. It wasn't really even an orbit. They sort of popped up out of the upper atmosphere and then back down again. And most people say that didn't really count because they didn't get up into orbit, actually out in space beyond, the end of the atmosphere. But in terms of, so you can do that right now. I think it's something like $250,000, depending on which of them, you want to sign up with, Amazon or Branson or whatever. I saw prices from $250,000 to $500,000. So, you don't have to be a billionaire maybe, but that's still a lot of cash. Yeah. And it's going to be over in a few minutes. It's just,
how many minutes is it? If I'm signing up with Jeff Bezos, let's say Amazon, how long am I, and I drop the $250,000?
Yeah.
How long am I going to be in space for?
I seem to remember it was, a few minutes. I can't remember exactly what it was. It depended on the launch, but it's over pretty fast. And it's kind of cool that the William Shatner went up on one of those, the original Captain Kirk from Star Trek. The first time the actor actually went to space sort of. But
Thanks,
so, and I think he was a guest, so we didn't pay the cash. But
well,
anyway,
right, you can.
yeah.
But your article starts with this kind of in 2035 future planning, and that's where scientists are kind of trying to get us to, of humans being able to travel up to a year, over a year, to really be able to explore and achieve further and further in outer space. Can you talk a little bit about why they're working on that? And is it really going to happen? Do you think it's going to happen by 2035, as you discuss in your article?
Well, Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX, he was talking 2024. He's now bumped it to 2029. 2035 is a NASA prediction that's, was made a few years back. That's, so we're still a little fuzzy on when exactly this is going to happen. I mean, a lot of things have to go right and money spent and, many other factors before it works. But the cool part is that we are actually getting closer and closer, and there are some really smart people trying to make this happen. So, when exactly it will happen, it's hard to tell, but, 2029 isn't that far away. Let's give it the next 10 to 20 years. There's a good chance that we'll get a crew that goes to Mars.
All right, so this crew that goes to Mars, can you talk about, you mention in your article that there are 5 red level hazards that happen to the human body with long-term space travel like this. Can you identify those and tell us a little bit about those?
No, sure. I want to preface this by saying that humans we haven't evolved to be in space. And there are many reasons why our bodies don't really work in that environment. And I grew up on Star Trek and all these great sci-fi shows, and I was pretty sure we'd be in space by now, but it wasn't really how it was depicted on those shows. It's quite a hostile environment for humans. And the fact that we've been there, and around 600, humans have been up into space, mostly on the space station, space shuttle. We've had a few on the moon. It's actually quite astonishing that we've been able to get humans up there safely. But these 5 red level challenges are, NASA's way of sort of, categorizing these different problems. And there are many more than 5 actually, but these are the main ones. And you first have radiation. We are actually, as we speak here, being bombarded by solar energy, solar particles, which come from the sun, and also by space, cosmic particles that are coming from all kinds of action that's going on out in the universe, like stars exploding and things. And these are tiny, tiny little nano-sized particles that rush through us and mostly don't do much damage, especially since we're largely protected by our atmosphere and by a magnetic field around the planet. And so they deflect most of that from us. But in space, that magnetic field doesn't exist and the atmosphere doesn't exist. So you've got to deal with these tiny little particles that are, racing through us. Anyway, so that's radiation. That's probably the biggest one, the biggest bugaboo. We will need special shielding, which already exists on spacecraft that are made. And that's what they're working on at the moment. There's also, number 2 is isolation and confinement. So if you think about this, even if you're up on the space station, you're relatively close to Earth, you're still pretty isolated and you're in a tiny little tin can, basically. So that's another huge one. And if you think about heading to Mars on a spacecraft, even the Starship that SpaceX is planning, it's fairly big, 7 stories high, but you're stuck on that thing for those 10,000 hours that we talked about. That's in the title of my story for Alta. The third is distance from Earth. Okay, if you're on the space station, something happens, you can get back relatively easy. I mean, it still might take a little while. You have to get a spaceship. Well, they have an emergency escape, vessel up there, to take you back, or if something happens, or if there's an emergency. But when you're on your way to Mars, there's not, it's not easy to get back to Earth. You know, I mean, you are way the heck out there. So distance from Earth, and also things like calling home. I mean, from Mars, you're talking about a 20-minute delay or so to get, you know, a phone call back, for instance, Zoom call, whatever. The next is gravity, and you know, there is no gravity in space, and that has a lot of interesting effects on the human body. Muscles atrophy, your fluids in your body go all wacko, because when you're on Earth, you know, you're most of the fluids, or the body is designed for you to be standing up, having gravity. Those fluids that sink down into your feet and your lower body when you're in space, one of the first things that happen is they start moving to other parts of your body, like the middle of your body, and that causes a lot of discomfort. And then number 5 is hostile enclosed environments. And what that means is the space is a kind of difficult, hostile place to be. So basically, we've had to design technology to deal with all of these factors. And as I tick these off, I mean, think about in the 60s when, you know, when the first astronauts went up, and we didn't have the technology we have now. The fact that they survived space was extraordinary, and going to the moon, you know, in 1969 on Apollo 11. So those are the 5, and there are many others. I mean, I haven't even gotten into how it affects your genes, for instance, or other aspects of your body, but those are the 5 big ones.
Well, it's fascinating that scientists are working so hard to study all of this. With so few people that have traveled in space, especially for long term, it seems like they have very little data to utilize to kind of figure out, well, what's going to happen if someone like you or I, who don't have the physical and mental training and kind of vetting of a astronaut, how are they figuring this out? And is it just a few people up in space and they're kind of going, well, this guy, I mean, you mentioned in your article, one astronaut grew 2 inches, or his body, when he landed, he was 2 inches taller because his spine had kind of stretched out. And then hours later, he shrunk down to his regular height. But it seems like very little data to kind of figure this out, because there are so few of the guinea pigs who are doing this, who are out there in space. Are people signing up? Like, how do they figure this out?
Actually, there's a lot of data. I mean, they have very few people. I mean, the population that's been tested of 600 people is not very many. And by the way, they are rigorously selected. So, you know, they're selected for being physically in great shape. You know, the mental health of people in space is an issue. I mean, you know, Navy people on submarines and other enclosed spaces for long periods of time, or in the Arctic or Antarctica, you know, in the stations there, when they're, you know, kind of in these same hostile environments and smaller spaces, people do sort of lose it. I mean, a tiny percentage. That's not really happened, at least that we've heard of in space, because these people are very rigorously selected. But as more and more people go up, you know, you have different issues that can happen like that. But there has been an extraordinary amount of data, and this sort of, what feeds into this is what I write about most of the time, which is molecular biology, healthcare, you know, sort of cutting edge of where we are with collecting data on the human body, you know, what's going on at a very minute level, you know, systematically, all of these different things, genetics, microbiome. So all of that is being applied to these people who have gone up into space. And there's been some fascinating studies, like the Kelly brothers, Mark and Scott. They did a twin study of these 2 brothers who were astronauts. And one of them Scott was up in space for a year, and Mark stayed down on Earth, and he's a US Senator also. And they compared the 2 of them, taking measurements frequently, you know, blood, other measurements, to see how they were doing. And it was interesting to see how these genetically identical brothers, you know, identical twins, how they diverged, and then when Scott came back to Earth, how they kind of came back together again. And there are still some differences. Obviously, they're also, you know, they were identical in the womb, but they've had differences since then, just by being different people for years and years. But how they diverged was also pretty fascinating.
Why is it important that scientists are working towards this goal, or working towards making long-term space travel more hospitable to the human body? Is it because because we're ruining Earth and we're going to need to live somewhere else? Is it because we need exploration is part of the human experience and we must continue to explore? Do we need to beat Russia? Why are we doing this? What's the point?
Yeah, Russia's an interesting question, but we'll leave that one. We'll set that one aside.
Okay.
There are rivals for sure. China probably more than Russia these days. But there are a number of reasons. It's a reason we are a very curious species. So part of this is just, it's out there, and this is what drove explorers throughout human history. So what can we find out there? I mean, Mars is sort of tantalizingly close, even though it's, depending on what time, where it is on the respective orbits of Earth and Mars, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of miles away, but it's relatively close for space. What's going on in Mars? I have a picture of it behind me there. I mean, what are those little ridges? What's going on? So the curiosity. We also, in terms of the physiology aspect, it's helping us understand human physiology, how the mind works, genetics, all of these different factors, by putting humans in very extreme conditions. And Michael Barrett, who is the astronaut physician that I interviewed for the piece, and he was the head of NASA's Human Research Program, which is where a lot of this is done. And they've got a fairly large budget trying to figure out all of these things. He talks about how humans become what he calls extraterrestrials when they're on the space station, which is where he was for 199 days. So he knows of which he speaks. I mean, he studies it. He's a space physician, but he also has been up there. And by extraterrestrial, he means when you're in space, your body goes through a rapid sort of almost evolution in figuring out how to adapt itself to the weightlessness, to all of the different deprivations that are there. And it sounds honestly pretty painful and sort of difficult when you arrive, and your body's adjusting, but it doesn't take very long, a few days, according to Dr. Barrett, for you to adjust. And at first you're kind of wondering, you're grabbing onto the hooks and kind of, wondering how to propel yourself through the weightlessness. But within a few days, as he said, you're zooming through the space station like Superman. So we do adapt, and that's kind of exciting unto itself. And for physicians, for others, that the human body can actually adapt to something like that. Well, those are some reasons.
You've obviously done a lot of work on this subject. I'm curious, say it's 2035 where you can sign up. You have an opportunity to take the 10,000 hour road trip. Are you going?
I think I would love to go to space, take a few orbits, that kind of thing. I probably personally would want to wait until we can go to a planet that's more like Earth than Mars is. I mean, Mars has some similarities to Earth. It does have a very light atmosphere. The gravity is, I think, about 3/10 of the Earth. There is water there. There are a few things that make Mars possible, but it's going to be a pretty rugged experience there. And I don't know, part of me is really curious, but 10,000 hours in a little spaceship.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm waiting for honestly, like I said, when I was a kid, I was thinking we would be out with, marvelous starships by now. I'm kind of waiting, maybe for a slightly more luxurious, trip up there.
The Concorde to Mars.
Yeah, something like that. Or maybe a Dreamliner.
The QE2 to Mars.
Yeah.
Well, so where else would we go if not Mars? And there's nowhere else we could possibly, well, I don't know, kind of hit at least in our lifetime. Other than Mars, is there? Would we need to be in, I mean, I'm thinking other universe. What other planet could possibly have the four seasons experience you so desire?
Yeah, I don't know about the four seasons, but I mean, there are calculations that
Glamping.
yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not Martha's Vineyard. Exactly. But yeah, there are calculations that say there should be a lot of Earth-like planets, and there's been exoplanets that that we've detected with telescopes that could be Earth-like. They're in the right place with a yellow sun like ours. I mean, the conditions for life on Earth are incredibly delicate, and it's sort of what they call a Goldilocks zone. That's not too hot, not too cold, et cetera, et cetera. And that's gonna be fairly rare in space. But given the number of stars, the number of planets, they're probably out there. But getting there is a bit of a challenge, because we're not even moving at light speed, much less like say warp speed on Star Trek, and these distances are extraordinarily large. So we'll see how this all goes. But I would like to find one of those planets and go there if it was take less than say 7,000 years.
Fair enough. That seems more than reasonable. Christy asks, how much of our exploratory spirit is focused on connecting with other entities out there? Which all, begs the obvious. Is there life in outer space, and are they friendly?
Well, as far as we know, they haven't knocked on the door at this International Space Station. Are they out there? Who knows? I mean, like I said, there's at least we think there are a lot of planets that could support life similar to life on Earth, but we don't even know. There could be lots of other ways that life could be supported. I mean, even on Earth, one of the things that I write about is sort of extreme areas on Earth. I mean, there are bacteria that grow in volcanic vents, and they're alive. And that means, you could have life potentially living, on a planet that wasn't anything like ours, or that had an atmosphere with, very different set of gases that would kill us, but other life might thrive in. So we don't know.
What about intelligent life?
Again, who knows? I mean, I'm pretty open on these things. Who knows?
Do you think
among us right now? I could be one for all you know. We probably will find out. I have mixed feelings sometimes about us broadcasting our presence out in the universe.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm a historian by training, actually, even though I write about the future. And it hasn't always gone well when more primitive civilizations announce their presence, and more advanced civilizations come, and maybe they're benign, but maybe not. And we certainly, with our radio waves and everything, we've got a century or more of announcing our presence. So if they're out there, they'll probably hear us at some point, and we'll see what happens when they come to say hi.
And you think that it's a risky proposition because we have no idea? This is all, I mean, I'm thinking of the movie Contact, of course, or the book written by Carl Sagan, and then the movie where they ask these questions of, who's to say we're, an ant on a molehill and they're just going to get rid of us.
Well, I did say if they're benign, that would be nice, or even helpful. Sure. I mean,
right. They could have the cures to cancer and
yeah.
The ozone layer.
Yeah, we haven't always done the right thing by, civilizations that we've discovered on Earth. So don't want to get too much into that, but that's right. I think we need to just think it out, kind of be careful about it, or just let it happen, see what happens. I don't know. I mean, the waves, the radio waves are out there, and we're broadcasting our presence, so we'll see.
Is there, especially now as space travel is becoming privatized with organizations like SpaceX and Amazon and Richard Branson doing this, as well as NASA, which is a government-funded organization, one that is kind of beloved, I think, by a lot of Americans. Is there a morality of humans that we that all of these kind of organizations, be it NASA or SpaceX, should be adhering to or have a responsibility to if we're going to rep Earth out there in outer space. Because you bring up this point of colonization, as it were. Has that been discussed? Is NASA discussing that? Are people reaching out to these private organizations saying, all right, let's all get on the same page. We're going to be cool, right? And think this through?
Yeah, it is a little bit beyond the scope of this article, but I do know that it has been discussed. And in fact, what I'm describing to you with the sending out all of these radio waves for over a century is the subject of books, and I've even read a thriller recently that was sort of the plot line about Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 when an alien craft supposedly landed. The point of this book was that they came because they detected our radio waves. It turned out that they were benign, but you never know.
Is there anything that the scientists who are kind of studying the impact on the human body, is there a way to use artificial intelligence in any capacity to determine this?
Sorry.
Are you being abducted?
Yes, no, I am being abducted by aliens right as we speak. I am with my family here in Martha's Vineyard, so I got back a little early.
I totally understand.
From the planet they were visiting, yes.
Right. Is there a way to utilize AI without, or robots or whatever to avoid kind of risking humans' astronaut health and safety?
Well, yeah, there's part of we were talking about earlier about the sort of ethics of this. There is a whole camp at NASA and in the space community and beyond that thinks we should only send robots out into space. And that in fact we're spending all this time and money on sending fragile humans, which we have to take care of, when robots are already they're on Mars. They're already on Mars, have been for a while. They're exploring asteroids. They've been all over the solar system really, and maybe we should just send out robots. They're also I wrote a book about 3 years ago called Talking to Robots, which you mentioned. And one of the chapters, it's setting up future scenarios for what might happen with different robots. And one of the scenarios is in the future, we need to leave Earth. And so that you have a choice. You can either download yourself into a robot, actually essentially become a robot, or you can, we haven't talked about this, but you can basically kind of make your body able to stand space through genetic engineering, different synthetic, implants, things like that. So, and these are all things that are mentioned in the article, or at least the synthetic part. And there are scientists right now working on genes that, for instance, in some organisms can protect you from radiation in space. And at some point, we may be able, with gene editing, to actually edit these in to astronauts, and who knows, it might give them some protection anyway from radiation.
And ultimately edit them into people if we need to depart Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
This is fascinating. This is so interesting. Last question for you. What is next for you? Oh, going to Mars is a waste of time. Why climb down the gravity well of a planet with less than 2 cents? If Elon wants to move to Mars, I'm cool with that. Hi, Paul. I'm sorry, did you get a chance to read this?
Yes, I did read it, and I know Paul, and I love that Paul, because Paul is a futurist too, and I don't know if you were here, Paul, but Mars may not be just, it's closest, and we have the technology to reach it with humans right now. It's not possibly the best candidate out of all the candidates that might be out there. Like I said, there may be better ones, but we're not even close to being able to reach a planet, at least that we know of, that would be better than Mars.
Also, Paul says that Mars is uglier than Burbank. I think Burbank is fantastic and has the best airport in Southern California. All right, David, last question for you. Is there a some component that's kind of unifying about this for us, and you'd mentioned earlier, as you and I were talking before we began, that the world is awfully stressful right now with the people being so at odds with our humongous problems, both in America and beyond, the pandemic, the gun epidemic. Can we find some ray of hope in civilian space travel? Is this going to bring us together in some human way, beautifully human way?
Yes. I mean, I think I was, this is giving away my age, but I was a little kid when we landed on the moon and Apollo 11. I mean, I remember it, watching it on TV. It united the world. Everybody was thrilled by this. Every single person, every eye who could find a television was watching that. And it was just a moment that, and 1969 wasn't, it had a lot of turmoil at that time too. But, for a brief and shining moment anyway, we were united by this extraordinary accomplishment and, the ingenuity of our species to be able to do something like that. And, I think we need inspiration right now. And I guess if I would pick one thing about all of this, it is inspiring. I was incredibly privileged to be able to talk to Michael Barrett and these other astronauts and for this story. And, what they're doing is inspiring. And, whether you think it's crazy or not, there are also a lot of benefits to us here on Earth. I mean, I think many people anyway, know that the Apollo mission produced a lot of benefits that we're still using, like the computers that they built, the way that they figured out how to store food, a lot of different aspects, technologies of that era translated into a lot of wonderful products and technologies that we could use here on Earth. And that's clearly happening not only with the hard technologies, the engineering, but also with how we're studying the human body and other organisms. I mean, all the little organisms they take up into the space station and study how they do in space. So I don't know, I find that part exciting. And even if it is a little crazy to go to Mars or out in space, but we are learning a lot that I think will benefit us for a long time.
Thank you. I love that we end on a positive note. David Ewing Duncan, I am so grateful that you took the time to share this with us today. Folks, we will send you not only a link to this interview, but a link to David's article in Alta Journal, where you can find his other work, including his book about robots. I also would like to invite you next week, July 13th, we'll be talking about the Santa Monica lifeguards that helped found a World War II special unit, now known as the Navy SEALs. So join us for that. That's July 13th at 12:30. David, again, thank you so much. This was really informative and fascinating and exciting. Thanks.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.